So, Zane.
Yes.
What is your preferred way to drink whiskey?
I prefer my whiskey neat.
Oh, neat.
And actually, I enjoy it in a standard whiskey glass.
Oh, so like a standard whiskey glass.
That's correct.
Interesting. So, how do you know you're getting everything you can get out of your whiskey that you're drinking?
Educate yourself.
Oh, that's a good idea. So, I wonder if we should maybe talk about how to drink whiskey.
How to drink whiskey on Hold My Whiskey by Whiskey Pop.
Right after this. Welcome to Hold My Whiskey. My name is Jeff.
And I am Zane.
And today we're going to talk about how to drink whiskey. Because let's just face it, there are some of us out there who just started drinking whiskey.
Right.
And there are some of us out there who might have just been drinking whiskey differently.
And we're not saying you don't know how to drink.
Not saying that at all.
What we're talking about is to elaborate the experience.
Increase your experience with drinking whiskey.
That's correct.
Because whiskey is all about being with friends.
Yes.
And
right.
experiencing this together. I think the first thing we need to talk about when we talk about drinking whiskey is the glass.
There are myriads of glasses.
There's a crap load of glasses.
Now, as I alluded to, this is not my favorite glass to drink.
But that is a nosing glass, right?
Also known as
the Glencairn.
The
Glencairn.
But it is a nosing glass. And why do we call it the nosing glass?
Because as a nosing glass, it basically directs the vapor of whiskey and the scent of whiskey a little more up in here. And it doesn't allow it to just evaporate out as this big wad of past your head. When you go in with a nosing glass, you can kind of get right on in there and smell it.
You literally can put your nose right into it.
If you're not big on the Glencairns, you may have seen the old standard whiskey glass.
And
right?
that's what I like.
Now that is great. I suggest that a standard whiskey glass is great if you're familiar with the whiskey you're drinking. Because if you wanted to discover a whiskey, this is not really allowing you to discover it so much as just delivering it at a very quick pace.
It's not the volume or the speed. It's the ease of how... Look, I can reach down and grab that, pull it to my face, take a sip, and immediately go back to whatever it is I'm doing. Here I feel like, oh,
you're being snooty.
I have to be like, oh, I must nose my whiskey.
Hold up your pinky. Hold up your pinky.
Yeah, but
now there's also a varying amount of glasses, right?
Yeah, sure. You got the fluted, what do you want to call that? Almost a snifter looking.
Yeah, it's a kind of a strange fluted glass. You can also, they got some newer versions of the Glencairn kind of.
That one's the one that sneaks up on you.
You could go the route of the solo cup.
Which is better than some of the ways, I guess.
Listen, I get it. If you're a bachelor, right, and you're drinking out of a solo cup.
Or you can just shoot with a solo cup.
That's crazy, right? But I'm saying if you're a bachelor and you're drinking with a solo cup, you got other problems. Listen, you don't need to be buying whiskey and you can afford some glasses. Come on, man.
That's the true test.
This isn't college anymore. Come on, it's time to grow up.
Now, let's take it into a more scientific way. We're talking about how to drink whiskey, how to pull out the most from it.
That's right. Some whiskey can be very complicated.
Yes.
Or whiskey can be very basic, and it bases sometimes on how you approach whiskey. What different ways there are to drink whiskey.
Sure.
So you talked about in the beginning.
Yeah.
That you like your whiskey neat. What's that mean?
Neat. It means I like to have it by itself, not on the rocks, as in on ice, but just the whiskey itself.
Some people suggest that if the whiskey is too strong for you,
you can add a splash of water.
You can add some water to it. I've even seen videos online recently of gentlemen pouring like pitchers of water into a glass of whiskey.
Sacrilege!
What? No.
If we're into Kool-Aid, that's one thing. But whiskey flavored Kool-Aid is just not my thing.
No, you know what? You gotta go small and slow on that adding that water thing. It doesn't take much water to disperse that oil and give you a new experience. Anything over a couple of drops or more,
you could change it to where it's just nothing.
It really can start blanding it out pretty quick.
But like I mentioned, the other way is on ice.
That's like on the rocks, right?
On the rocks.
And a lot of people tend to like that still.
I would be shocked if that's not the #1 way of drinking whiskey. It'd be interesting to see a poll.
I mean, how many times you've been to a bar and somebody goes, give me a Jack and Coke, which is going to be Jack and Coke on ice.
Yeah, sure.
Or they're like, I want a whiskey on the rocks, and they're gonna pour. If you walk up to a bar and you say, I want a 2-finger pour of this whiskey neat, they're gonna know you're a whiskey drinker. So mixing whiskey is not a bad thing.
Oh,
I mean, I make some really good old fashions.
Old fashions.
You know, whiskey sour.
Manhattans, all those different things. They're great.
There's a lot of whiskeys that are good for that too, especially rye whiskeys are really good for that because they're a little more spicy they got a little more spice going on.
Yeah, sure.
So mixing whiskey's not a bad thing. Now here's what we got to clarify. Having it neat, adding a little bit of water, having it on ice, or mixing it, none of those are the right or wrong way to have whiskey.
No, the wrong way to have whiskey is to drink your whiskey and judge somebody else about how they're drinking theirs.
For sure. I mean,
That's the wrong way.
That's the wrong way. I mean, you should just enjoy the whiskey that you like to enjoy it and deal with it. How do you approach the whiskey?
And there's plenty of whiskeys that we've tried and not known shit about them.
That's true.
However, if you really want to expand your enjoyment, just Google it once, read what the seller says the notes are supposed to be.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with knowing a little bit of cliff notes before you go in and
because
jump on a whiskey.
Everything you pull out of whiskey tasting, and this is the more we've drank whiskeys, the more we discover this, is that everything you taste has to be based on a flavor memory that you can already name.
That's correct. And you bring up a good thing. So now think about when you're approaching a whiskey, the first thing you're doing is like you're looking at it and you're looking at the hue of a whiskey and things like that. But as you drink whiskey and you take it in, the experience is different in multiple ways.
You have to have knowledge if you're going to enjoy whiskey.
That's true.
You have to, and that's even before we've even gotten to nosing the glass or looking at if it's got legs. Do you know what that means?
Well, I think we should talk about those kind of things. So if you come into it, you poured your glass.
Yeah.
You got it here and you look at it, you can see the kind of the hue of it and get kind of an idea of the color. And you can see that we got a couple of different whiskeys here today, and you can see that each one of those hues are a little different and similar at the same time, and lighter and darker. So you can kind of see that in your glass too, and you know what you're kind of in for. Now, whiskeys that have tended to be in a barrel for a while longer pick up a little more tannin.
Yep.
And what do they start to do?
They create legs in the glass. They form on the edge of the glass. They don't want to release, and you'll see this coating on there. It's an oil.
It's an oil of some of the alcohol sugars that are within the whiskey. If that's what's sticking to that glass. Now you think about that. What's that whiskey going to do if it's sticking to a glass when it goes in your mouth?
Well, you're going to have a long finish.
That's correct. That's right. So that's where your long finishes come from.
Yeah.
So when you hear somebody say, wow, that's a really good different finish. Well, what it is you've salivated enough now that oil has mixed with water. When you mix water and you mix oils together, you get this strange chemical reaction. And when you're swirling your whiskey, you'll see guys, they'll get out there and they're like swirling the shit out of their whiskey. This is great. There's nothing wrong with that. But as you're swirling it, what's happening to that whiskey?
You're evaporating the vitamin A off of your alcohol.
Now, you may reduce some of the harshness of it, but you also are losing something about that whiskey. So you don't want to, I don't think you should disturb the whiskey too much. I mean, it looks neat, but I don't think disturbing it's a good idea.
But so for nosing, it's about getting the aromas deep into the palate.
And that's true. Now, the one thing you don't want to do is just shove your nose straight into that glass.
Because this looks really attractive.
Now, you'll go watch like guys who really drink whiskey, like connoisseurs of whiskey, and they're like...
Yeah, and they're also going...
That's fine. You're not one of those people yet, so don't even try. Yeah. They're chewing their whiskey.
Yeah.
I mean, that looks neat, and it's great, but come on. You're not watching a whiskey review for that reason.
And, we had mentioned on an episode, there is a better way to try to smell your whiskeys, which involve you keeping your mouth and nose open as much as possible.
That's right. And you want to try to smell it through each nostril separately if you can.
Right. If you can be as controlled as that.
Now, one thing you do is when you bring that glass up there to your nose, if it's too strong, just pull away from it a little bit. There's no reason to look cool by shoving your nose into a glass. You want to enjoy whiskey, not actually choke to death while you're trying to smell it.
No.
I mean, this is all part of the experience. It's not about getting drunk. It's not about drinking as much as you can. No, it's about enjoying it, right?
Yeah, this is about pulling in flavors so you can be that weirdo in the crowd that goes, I smell ice cream.
Yeah, just don't do that at the bar. You look really weird when you do that.
Chocolate eruption.
Oh, Mikey. Rocky Road. The next thing is when you swallow it, right? So you're gonna put it in your mouth. The first time you drink it, you should just drink it.
Oh, yeah, don't swirl it in your mouth.
Don't try to hold it in there for 20 minutes.
Just take that sip and let it go down.
What's gonna happen is that just gonna give your taste buds a little bit of a, oh shit, I just drank poison.
Because that's what alcohol is. This is really no joke. It's not good for you.
Your body,
it's so good for you, you know?
Your body has been built to protect you from doing dumb things.
And, you know.
And this is one of those dumb things. You're telling your body, it's not water, it's good for me.
But it is so great. I mean, because, again, this is one of those few things that our palates can explode upon with the different flavors. And it's sensually fantastic.
That's true. Now, what happens on that second? You hear guys say, I didn't really like it on the first drink, but on the second drink, I really liked it. Well, what happened was you activated all those taste buds. They're like, so while they're screaming like that, they're also salivating and putting out all your salivary glands are throwing out. Now you're mixing that with the whiskey the next time around. So it's not as...
Yeah, you went from being in shock to now finally being back in control.
And eventually you'll get drunk enough.
It's not about getting drunk.
That you won't be arguing anymore with your brain about how dangerous this is for you to drink.
I feel like we have to have a public service announcement. Like, are you lonely? Has you been finding yourself trouble? Well, alcohol is not the solution. We at Whiskey Pop.
Woo! Come on, Zane!
It is the solution.
We've been told on YouTube you should be responsible. So
be responsible.
We're being responsible. So drink responsibly. And like I said, it is not about getting schnookered.
And you don't buy premium whiskeys to shoot it in a solo cup.
If you're still shooting it in a solo cup, you're spending way too much money on whiskey. Go buy some glasses. Now, like I said, after you've had your drink, there is what we call the finish. And that's how long the whiskey is lingering in there. And at the same time, it's now kind of macerating your word with the whiskey. And what it's doing is it's giving you those extra bit of flavors that are still hanging out. This is where you start getting kind of those subtle things that are coming up, right?
Absolutely. And I like to drink most of my whiskey neat. It's because it allows me to reserve when I decide to add a little water to change up something I've been drinking for a while and totally change it completely.
I agree, because there are times when I got a whiskey that I really like and I'll throw some ice in it just to finally see if there's something else I can pull out of this whiskey that I haven't pulled out of it when it was neat. And it's true, you will. The problem with ice is it is really hard to control. And as you throw ice in your whiskey, that ice melts so fast that it's constantly changing how that whiskey is going to taste. And that's why you see guys go out and they'll buy or these big giant spheres or the cubes, because they're trying to kind of slow down that melting process. But for me, I've always found that really cold whiskey never tastes the same.
No, it doesn't taste the same, and the colder my whiskey gets, typically, the less I can taste the whiskeys.
When you're tasting whiskey, you'll hear us especially, or other whiskey drinkers say, oh, this tastes like, you know,
the taste like.
Tastes like caramel, and then and with a touch of tanniny, woodsy, charred oak with a little bit of toasted almond, and you're like, where the they getting all these flavors out of this whiskey?
It tastes like pickles.
Exactly right.
Yeah.
What happens is as you drink whiskey, you start to develop new memory from things that you've eaten or smelled or impacted with. It takes time for that to happen. So when you first start drinking whiskey, it all tastes like
it's just hot or something. You know,
or it's just wood.
Don't be discouraged that you don't pick up those nuances.
Be patient. Take time. This is drinking whiskey is a marathon. It is not a sprint.
Yeah, it's an acquired taste, but acquired flavor palettes, and you know, it eventually gets to that point where it's surprising how easy it is to break down those flavors once you add enough.
And it might be a whiskey that you've had a dozen times, and then all of a sudden you come back to that whiskey, and all of a sudden you can taste something in it you've never remember tasting before. And it's because your palate is starting to develop and pick up things that you didn't pick up initially.
Right.
I mean, I think a lot of new whiskey drinkers, it's spicy, it's hot, I can taste some vanilla, I can taste some caramel, and I can taste oak. Yeah. Those are the things you pick up first when you first start drinking whiskey, but as you go along,
you want to be like, oh, it's a hint of hibiscus.
Now here's the thing, you'll hear a lot of people tell you that when they start drinking whiskey, you may introduce whiskey to a friend, they're like, I don't like whiskey, it's too hot, you know, it just doesn't taste right. There's a reason for that, because you tell somebody you drink whiskey, you're like, oh, you drink whiskey, that's pretty rough.
Yeah.
Like whiskey still counts as like the rough drink.
Yeah.
I mean, but we're not talking about being a cowboy and walking into the bar and sliding up going, give me a shot of whiskey, and you just shoot it. You gotta take your time with that kind of stuff. And a lot of those people are thinking, I'll just shoot it because it's painful. But it takes time for your things to acclimate to that type of stuff.
Let's put it this way. You don't take a cigar and try to suck it down in one drag.
That's right. And the same thing goes with whiskey. There's so many different ways to enjoying whiskey and the type of whiskeys you can have. Just keep looking for the one that you feel like fits for you. You may not be a big bourbon drinker.
Yeah.
You may love Scotch. You may not be a big Scotch fan. You may like Irish whiskey. There's so much out there to say, I just don't like whiskey in general. It might tell somebody that you just haven't really tried stuff yet, because there's a lot out there. Because those same people will go drink Zima and, you know, Jolly Ranchers. Or they may drink vodka and Red Bull.
There's nothing wrong with vodka and yellow candy.
That's right, but that's like, so that's not saying you don't like whiskey. That's just saying you haven't tried the right kind of whiskey that's for you.
Here's the best experience of whiskey right now. I just finished like one of my favorite bottles of whiskey. I tossed that one back, and I'm sad.
Because you don't have any more.
I don't have any more. And it's like, because I took it down, as it were, over several weeks. You know, we're not talking being a sot here.
He's lying. It was several minutes.
Nah. But you get done with it, but you had that, I don't know, you'd be weird about it. You had that relationship, as it were, that experience. I love you. And then when it's over with, you're like, yeah, that was good. That was fun. And then you're thinking, man, I need to should I replace that into my collection? Or should I go ahead and find something else in its place? And it's just
Meantime, if there's something that we didn't talk about today of how you enjoy your whiskey, write it down below. Hey, what about you? Do you like your whiskey on the rocks? Do you like your whiskey neat?
Yeah.
Let's hear it. I want to see down below, all of you who've watched this today, make sure you comment below before you leave. How do you like to drink your whiskey? I want to see which one is the most popular.
Because if it's on the rocks, I will win, because that's what I think.
I think on the rocks is probably the most popular, but maybe we're wrong. Maybe there's a lot of neat people out there. Neat. I know anybody watching our channel is neat no matter what.
And that was corny as hell.
That was. In the meantime, you guys continue to be cool this week. We'll see you next week for another episode of Hold My Whiskey. Cheers.